Thank you so much for inviting me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you first and foremost for your service to the community. It's very much appreciated out there. Also, thank you for keeping all the fire victims in your hearts and prayers, as well as the first responders. My son Pat is up and he's been working for the last week with CAL FIRE, and it's been pretty hellacious, thinking that fire is exponentially worse than what we thought we had going through last year. So there's a long road ahead, and certainly California. I think that there's actually thought that one of the governors, whether it's the governor-elect or the governor, might call even a special session to figure out what they're going to do long-term on wildfires, really still dealing with the issues with PG&E or the utility companies on the indemnification and the inverse condemnation. So stay tuned. I think it'll be an interesting year as we go forward on all things on fire. I'm here to talk about whatever you want to talk about, really. I thought I'd hit on two things real quick. One thing is because of the fires, related to the fires, housing. I don't know if we're in a housing crisis or not. Many people say we are. I think we are. I know that with my young children, housing costs have gone through the roof. We have a zero vacancy rate. We have record high rents and record high property values. But yet, at the same time, we're still stuck in this quagmire of trying to get housing starts going forward in California. California, for whatever reason, I'm an architect, so I come from this from both sides. California makes it difficult and lengthy to get anything built. And it's something that has gotten the attention of another board that I'm on. I'm president of the Bay Area Association of Counties, and through that, with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which I'm going to be on as of February, because I'm appointing myself tonight at our ABAG meeting, as have the last 4 ABAG presidents, by the way. But there's this group called CASA. CASA was put together to solve the Bay Area's housing crisis. No small task, but it's really the acknowledgement that what we've been doing for the last 20 years has not worked. You have this extreme shortage of housing units. You've got people spending way too much as a percentage of their income. You've got commuters coming in from now the Inland Valley or the Central Valley coming into work here in the Bay Area. And it's something that really needs to have a discussion. And so there's this movement, this group called CASA, which is quote unquote this blue ribbon committee. So it's got the mayor of San Francisco, London Breed. It's got Libby Schaaf, the mayor of Oakland. It's got the mayor of San Jose, Sam Liccardo. It's also got Facebook, Apple, and Google sitting at the table. It's got, my phone is talking. It's got myself as a representative of local governments, 9 counties and 106 cities. It's got nonprofit. It's got labor. It's got environmental. Everyone's sitting down for the last year looking at, and they've separated it into 3 categories. The 3 Ps, they call it: preservation, protection, and production. Production, easy enough, building new housing, trying to make that easier. Protection, all the tenants' rights issues that have been swirling around the Bay Area. And preservation is really to make sure that those deed restricted houses or units that we have out there that are coming to the end of their deed restriction are going to be somehow going forward and making sure that we can continue that vein. The idea, obviously, is to not just have affordable housing units for the Bay Area, but to have housing units at all levels of the Bay Area going forward. And it's been interesting because it's this unholy alliance of folks who have specific interests that they're really trying to either guard against damage to or push for. But at the end of the day, came up with 50 ideas to really kind of move the needle, and narrowed that down through a series of meetings. Last one was, I think, 6 hours last Sunday in the city. The legislature is part of this because the idea is that we're going to sign a compact at the end of the year here that's going to be handed over to the legislature in Sacramento, and then we're going to pray like hell because they're going to go pick it apart. But the idea is to move it forward and to actually try to make a difference. And I think it's a great conversation to have. I'm not sure if I'm totally convinced that it's going to really, truly move the needle, but I'll read you a couple of different things. On the protection side, or the protection. Talking about just cause eviction standards. Having one ordinance for the Bay Area instead of having 115 of them. They call this one, the name of this particular piece has gone back and forth, emergency rent cap, which is really, one time it was started as rent control. That doesn't go very well or very far. It anti-rent gouging at one time it was called, and now it's back to this emergency rent cap, which really just caps the amount within any given year going forward. And the realtors are at the table too, because I think they see the value in having one ordinance instead of having every city try to come up with something they think is going to work, when the reality is there's not a lot of data out there to show you that. The right to legal counsel for eviction is another one. Although I can tell you yesterday that Mayor Schaaf from Oakland was talking about trying to pay the rent rather than the attorneys. So there's some thoughts about how we go forward on that. One of the things that we've done here in Sonoma County, and this now moves into another category about production, but removing barriers to the accessory dwelling units and the tiny homes. We've done this from day one after the fires, is to try to make it as easy as possible. In fact, in Sonoma County, if you live in the unincorporated county, you can get an over-the-counter permit for an accessory dwelling unit, which is pretty much unheard of and hadn't been done in the past. So proud of that streamlining piece. Another one, that there was a bill going forward that passed minimum density at transit, public lands at transit. This really was part of the BART bill. If you followed all the BART lands, the stations that are along the BART right-of-way, trying to make sure that the housing that was going to be built there was going to be dense enough that we weren't going to look back in a few years and say, should have built more. Especially as we're trying to accommodate, 2 million more people in the Bay Area by the year 2040. So these are important places that we could do this. Here in Sonoma County, we have the opportunity on the Smart Rail, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But we have two empty parcels here in Petaluma that probably should be built pretty as densely as possible. We have issues here in Sonoma County of really building anything higher than 4 or 5 stories because of the excessive cost of construction after a certain level, and because you can't get the return on those particular units going forward. We're not San Francisco, we're not Oakland, we're not San Jose in that regard, but we're trying to increase those densities. Housing process approval, or across the board, kind of implementing what they are shying away from is secret reform, which is something that really needs to happen. But this also starts to tweak at that a little bit in terms of this Permit Streamlining Act, in terms of speeding up the process. There's even this idea that you get 3 public hearings 1 year. Make up your mind, no more than that going forward. So again, kind of holding jurisdictions accountable to a process. Improved SB 35. SB 35 was that ordinance, that law that was passed last year that had to do with the right to build if you met certain criteria within certain zones, and it needs to be tweaked a little bit and cleaned up. I think again it goes back to the kind of the density piece. Providing public land for housing production, again something here in Sonoma County that we're working on diligently. In fact, I think next week some of the old water agency land is going to be proposed for a couple hundred units. Shenate didn't go very well the first time through, but that's public land that will be used for housing. But this is for the entire Bay Area. One of the more controversial things, 2 of the more controversial things, funding, taxes, fees, whatever. Right now we spend about $3 billion a year in the Bay Area on affordable housing. It needs to be about $5 billion. They're trying to close the gap. And you can imagine the 9 counties to raise $2 billion a year. You're talking about some pretty significant dollar amounts. So stay tuned on that one, because that's been a lot of debate. I personally think a lot of those proposals are dead on arrival. They're just not going to happen. But there are different categories. There were about 20 originally, trying to make sure that every sector was actually going to feel a little bit of the pain. Just like with the compact, there's something in there for everyone to like. There's something in there for everyone to hate. And the idea is that we're all kind of pulling together and got to make do to make the entire Bay Area a better place. But that's not my time, so. And the last one, through that, because there's excuse me. Is that me? Go ahead. Because there's this regional housing entity and holding cities accountable for their, what we do at ADAG is something called RENA. It's a state mandate that regional housing needs assessment. Every jurisdiction gets a certain amount of housing units that they're required to zone for. They zone for it, but they never quite always build them. Here in Petaluma, we actually did very well until the demise of redevelopment, and we're falling a little bit behind going forward. But it's basically taking RENA and revising that so you don't just zone for it, but you actually have to build a certain amount. And I think taking it even further is having to build a certain amount of market rate housing, missing middle housing, workforce housing going forward, because it's something that the entire Bay Area needs. So stay tuned next year, because I think the short story on all of that is that this compact will get signed one way or another. We'll go to Sacramento, even if it doesn't get signed by the bodies that proposed it, because of the debates that are flurrying around there. You'll see a lot of legislation on people trying to make housing improvements. And the feeling from some of the legislature is, and I don't necessarily disagree with them, is that certain jurisdictions are not doing their fair share. Another one that is part of that is capping development impact fees. It's interesting, there's a Turner study out of UC Berkeley that talks about the difference in the wide range of development impact fees. For a single, they did 7 cities as a sample. Excuse me. The city of Sacramento was the lowest on the in the books, about $21,000 and change per door for a development impact fee. The city of Fremont, for whatever reason, $157,000. So where does that come from? And everyone else is in between, including Petaluma, which is, I think, about 60 some odd thousand. It depends, and it's hard to track down. There's not a lot of transparency in this. I know this for a fact, because I think my brother is going through this now. He bought 2 lots in Cotati across from the SMART station. He got a quote of 3.5 times what he paid for the lot for the development impact fees. So cities and jurisdictions use that a lot. Obviously, it's ever since Prop 13, it's Prop 13 tax exempt, and so those go up continually. And I can tell you the fee studies that go through that process, it's basically numerator and denominator, and you get what you want. So there's jurisdictions that actually use that to set. They're all for housing. They just set the rates at such a level that you're not going to get the kind of housing that you really want. Inclusionary housing is another thing, where the amount of housing in a certain multi-unit development that's going to be deed restricted affordable. You get jurisdictions that are really pro-affordable housing will set a really high inclusionary rate, which only means that nothing will ever get built because it'll never pencil out. There's one jurisdiction that set 25%. 7 years, they've had 0 units being built. So again, UC Berkeley study, about 11.5% is that number. It varies because it varies upon the economy and where you're sitting. But about 11.5% of the units, anything above that, you got to actually have some skin in the game as well, meaning the local jurisdictions. Without redevelopment, it's really tough to do. We're going to New York to try to find out. New York does this thing where they actually give property tax rebates back to the development going forward. So they can actually get 30, 40% inclusionary if you want. Comes at a price, but we're all going to be in this together trying to figure this out. So housing is going to be an interesting thing, I think, in the next year going forward. I'm not sure, again, if I think the discussion is good to have, because I think a lot of these things have been problems for a long time. But will it truly solve the Bay Area's housing crisis? Not so sure. Infrastructure. One of the best things about the election was that Prop 6 failed, because Prop 6 was really, it's the gas tax. It's a repeal of Senate Bill 1 or SB 1. SB 1 was passed last year that increased your gas tax. And no one wants to pay more, but it's been 18 years prior to that has been increased. So for 18 years, we're stuck at that same level. 18 years, CPI, better mileage in cars. Gas tax has gone down. The dollar is worth about half of what it once was, and no wonder our infrastructure was where it was, with the prices going up everywhere else. So we do have a big chunk of change out there. It's $5.3 billion a year statewide. I think it would really make a generational change in the way that we deal with infrastructure here locally. It is going to mean that the Petaluma section, there's $85 million of the $122 million project from SB 1 funds. Now it's secure. Now it's going forward. We're totally funded in Sonoma County, which is a great thing. Local roads, of the $19 million SB 1 dollars on an annual basis, $12 million to the county alone. We've already decided that we were going to split our $12 million 50-50, so $6 million into pavement preservation, which is paving over roads, $6 million into maintenance costs because you got to make sure you take care of them as you go. The good thing is, something I'm very proud of. When I took office, the county was spending about $2 million a year on pavement countywide. We have 1,364 miles of roads in this county. We have a ton of roads. Marin County has 420, Napa has 460. We have 1,384. So we have all these miles of roads that we had to take care of, and we were only spending $2 million out of our discretionary dollars I'm talking about. So we've added more dollars into that, and right now we're about $14 million on an annual basis, but now we're going to be adding this 6. We'll be at $20 million, 10 times what we were 6 years ago, and that's why you're starting to really see a lot of roads being paved. We're at about 400 miles now in the last 6 years. We just paved 97 miles this summer, and hopefully you saw some of those out there. We still get more calls from the people on the roads that haven't been paved yet, but you know, it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going, and we're going to get there. So now we actually have a source of funds that's locked in and really going to make a difference. RM3, which is the regional measure 3, there's been 2 before, obviously. That's the bridge toll increase of the other bridges other than the Golden Gate. We've never participated in the dollars here in Sonoma County on RM1 or RM2, but we are on RM3. That's a great thing. We got $60 million. Well, we got $120 million, for the narrows through RM3. Now that we've paid for our piece through SB1, we can support Marin and push more money into Marin, who actually also passed their transportation measure last Tuesday, which for the first time named the narrows as a priority. So they're spending money on the narrows. They're doing all the environmental and right-of-way acquisition, and we'll be able to support them as well. And with the dollars that are coming together with the passage of these measures means that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel, and we're going to get this thing finally finished in the next so many years. Highway 37 is another one I'm working on. I'm chair of that 4-county consortium that's trying to figure out a solution. We have an interim solution, Caltrans solution, that's the quick fix, which is 7 years, $164 million. The long-term fix is going to be either $1 or $2 billion, depending on how much of the road has to be causeway. It's 21 miles in total, and you know that it's been sinking in the Bay mud. About 20 inches sea level rise is coming up. That's not a good combination. And people wait going to the East Bay in the afternoon commute at 121 for 80-minute delay on average every day. It's supposed to take 20 minutes total to get home. They sit there for 100 minutes to get across Highway 37. It's just horrible. So I look forward to pushing that forward. We're trying to get that accelerated. We're trying to really push that one going forward. There's $100 million allocated at RM3 to kind of kickstart that, and it's been allocated between the there's 4 counties. Napa doesn't have a piece, but they're worried about cars coming to the north. So it's been allocated to make sure that we take care of the flooding issues that occur on the Marin side, certainly the congestion issues that occur in the Sonoma and Solano side, including improvements to Lakeville intersection, improvements to the 121 intersection, and over on Mare Island. So there's also water. Water's always a big issue. I think we're at a place in water that's going to be interesting going forward. Our surface water, behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff happening there in terms of securing our rights for the future. The Potter Valley project, which is the Eel River diversion, PG&E wants to sell that diversion with the water rights with it, which if we don't secure for the upper half of the upper portion of the Russian River, will affect the fisheries downstream and will change, the other issues that are happening as we roll down the stream. We have groundwater with Sigma. We now have 5 groundwater agencies or basins within this county that we have to deal with, and we're trying to we're trying to get rid of one through an appeal to the state and divvying it up with Marin County. But here in Petaluma Basin, we have a groundwater basin that's actually pretty good. It's actually almost at equilibrium, but we'll still spend $1 million on a plan to make sure that we can keep it that way going forward. And how you actually then charge people for that is going to be problematic in my mind. We took a time out rather than kind of pushing forward any kind of fees to really try to work with one water So what you get for paying your fee for your well is that you're going to have more secure water through the projects that are going to be from surface water, from groundwater, from conservation, from recycled water, and from even winter floodwaters from the Russian River. Bringing winter floodwaters from the Russian River down into our basin and injecting them into the ground, using the aquifer as the next reservoir in Sonoma County, I think will be a good thing and will give people security and resiliency in their water systems. So, with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, David. I have two questions, totally unrelated, so I'll just put them both out there. Number one is regarding Prop 6 not passing. One of the things that was going around through NPR and other radio stations was that it was emphasized it was a gas tax, not a road tax, and therefore not necessarily would the funds be used for roads. So that's question number one. And the other question is, has the SMART train proved to be smart or not?
So on the gas tax, we did pass in June Prop 69, which constitutionally secured SB1 dollars to be used as it was written. So that's a good thing. Because California does have a habit of, when times get tough, going into accounts and pulling it over into other accounts. So that's the reason that came in June, because they knew that it was going to get recalled going forward. And, to be honest, the repeal effort that was underway wasn't necessarily a repeal of the gas tax. It was a political move to draw the base to the polls in the 7 congressional districts that were in trouble. And so that's why you didn't see a campaign for Prop 6. You only saw it against Prop 6. That's why you saw the campaign that, what was, I shouldn't even call it a campaign. They tried to make the news by suing this and that and get some free press out of it, but there was no campaign. It was really just to draw the base to the polls. SMART, I'm on the SMART board, and I would, time will tell in terms of, certainly the trains the ridership is higher than projected, and people are satisfied and happy with it. It's a great way to go. It's much better than sitting in your car in the Narrows. It's much better than sitting on squeezing in a bus. I think the first and last mile issues are always going to be the toughest to solve. And I think as we solve those and as we continue to build along the right-of-way, including here in Petaluma, including up in Railroad Square and in Santa Rosa, including even BioMarin is building more down in San Rafael. You'll have higher and higher ridership. Our problem then will be, and we're already starting to look at this, it's a single track system. It's got a certain capacity. The cars can only be, you can have 3 cars long to fit in the stations or to get through the cities. Is how we're going to actually boost the numbers to make sure that we're providing enough service, because it's going to be that, it has proven to be that popular going forward.
So I have a couple questions. The first is, why not try to streamline CEQA a little bit? I know Scott Wiener worked on that and only got so far. And then my second question is, what do you think of Teresa Barrett's idea of taxing vacant properties in order to encourage development?
Yeah, it wasn't the CASA didn't want to touch CEQA. I think CEQA reform is paramount, but it's up to Sacramento. And as Scott Wiener knows all too well, it's still a third rail to go after CEQA. It's like Prop 13. They don't want to touch it. They think it's political suicide, and they think that the CEQA reform is also political suicide. I disagree with them on that. I think that there's ways that you could tweak it. I think what they're fearful of is that, once you open it, it's Pandora's box. Who knows where it's going to go? Who's going to throw things in there? CEQA I think it's important to have CEQA. We've been well served by the concept of environmental review and mitigation. It's also been abused. I think we all know that. It takes too long, and it becomes very expensive, and it pays for a lot of attorneys.
David, thank you for your service.
Oh, the vacancy. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's one of the issues. And actually, yesterday I was in the city at the meeting, the CASA meeting, and I asked the question about the legality of that. I think that attorneys, if there's attorneys in the room, how does that fly with Prop 13 to tax, a vacant parcel another 1% of its overall value? You'd have to come up with a different way to charge it. The problem with local government has, thanks to our brethren in the state, Prop 218 and Prop 26 really limit you on how you can actually assess fees and taxes, because everything is looked at as a Prop 13 tax, essentially, paraphrasing a little bit. It just makes it that much more difficult. We have that same issue going on right now with Sigma. The state mandates that you have to charge everyone the Sigma piece, but then there's this whole part of that charge is that it's unconstitutional. So it's like, what do we do at the local level? Tell us, figure this out for us, help us move forward. So I think it remains to be seen. The only place that I know that has a 1% vacancy charge is Vancouver, but that's, of course, in Canada.
Thanks, David. Driverless cars, I kind of talked to you about this in front of the market the other day, but it seems like the driverless electric cars solve a lot of our problems. Final mile for smart, 37, the narrows. There's a lot of solutions around that. What do you see, or how long does that take? Because I know you hear about stuff before the rest of us do in terms of what they're working on. Can you give us any insight into that?
Yeah, I think this is a big debate about how quick it's actually, I think the technology is really there, right? Google's been driving around South Bay, relatively harmless for quite a while. So the technology is there. It's the whole kind of social piece that has not caught up yet. And we talked to both in the Obama administration, he's on the National Association of Counties Transportation Committee, both at the Obama administration and the career guys at the Trump administration, talking about when they think it'll move forward. They kind of see different demarcations, that maybe some trucks first, buses first, smaller shuttles that they have around before it starts to really launch. But I think, from what I understand and what they've told us, and every time I go to these seminars, technology is there. They're just not ready to put it out forward. If you'll notice, I think I told you, Rick, right? Now if you see a newly paved road, the fog line that used to be 4 inches wide is now 6 inches wide. And that's for autonomous cars or your car that has the lane control. There's no more bots in the freeway, those little bumps. That's for the same reason, that it can read the lanes better without those. So we're getting closer, and I think it's still up in the air. I'm not on the front lines totally on that, but I think it's going to be interesting, certainly from where we were.
Hi, David. So there's been a lot of articles and letters to the editor, and I tend to agree with it, that we don't have so much of a housing crisis as we do a population crisis. Certainly, I can understand rebuilding the houses that burnt and that are no longer here. We need to replace those. But I think that we are a little short-sighted if we want to build a bunch of houses and we don't have a good infrastructure. We don't have really natural resources with water. How many years have we been on droughts and water rationing? And to rush in to build a bunch of houses for people who want to come to Petaluma, want to come to Sonoma County, is not, I don't think, necessarily in our interest. And I am fearful about being an elitist or a NIMBY, but I think you got to look at the whole picture. Our quality of life, our roads, our environment, and so on. And I would just hate to see everybody. I think Measure M got defeated, and then so maybe people are saying we don't want a lot of houses.
No, and I don't disagree with you. I think that what you find through the election results, Measure N had another. We can talk about that in a sec. It had another little piece to it, but I think you're right. The hardest thing for me, I will tell you this, whatever decisions I make, is when you really start talking about capacity versus equitable, and equitable fairness. Whether it's a winery on a road that has too many wineries, why should the last guy in not be able to have the same property right as the guy next door? Right. Same thing is kind of true on housing to some degree. It is a difficult thing to kind of go through and work through, because when do you throw the wall up around a community and say, hey, we're done? And so the capacity issues, in some places actually hold back the resources and use, the water's been used in this county as a growth control mechanism. I will tell you that we have more than enough water to accommodate all of our growth, including the 40,000 houses that are anticipated in all the cumulative general plans in the county. We have it. We still have droughts, and we're still going to have conservation, and we're still going to preserve water and do all the other things and be proactive about that. And you know too, right? This is what happens. So Petaluma goes through a general plan update, and one of the elements is the transportation element or circulation element, talking about roads. So they anticipate we're going to have so many thousands of units in these different areas of town. It's going to create so much more traffic in these different areas of town, going across town and whatnot. So we decide as a community, before any project comes before us, we don't want wider roads. We don't want Petaluma Boulevard to be 4 or 6 lanes like Pleasanton. We're going to have lower levels of service at every intersection and segment of road. And we decide that, and we pass the general plan. And then a project comes along that creates more traffic. And everyone says, wait a minute, there's too much traffic. You can't approve that. But we all sat down before we even talked about that project and said that was a better alternative than more asphalt going forward. So I think we have to have a more open and honest discussion about it. I don't disagree with you in terms, we're not going to build ourselves out of the housing crisis. We certainly aren't, and I don't think anyone wants to change the quality and character of Petaluma. I do think that, we have 2 square blocks of dirt, a block from our train station, at a time when there's record high properties and record high rents and 0 vacancy. That doesn't seem right. So it isn't about sprawl, it's about that infill and about really coming forward with that. So I think we could do better. And the good thing with the Plan Bay area, of which I've been involved with, the majority of the growth, and again, it goes to capacity. They say there's going to be 2 million more people here in the Bay Area by 2040. You could argue with the numbers. It's probably better to plan ahead, rather than get caught behind. We've actually increased the job numbers exceeding what they anticipated for 2040 because of Facebook, Google, Apple, Twitter, all those other things, mostly down in the Silicon Valley and San Francisco. But we don't have the housing units. If you look at it, the housing jobs balance is way off. And so that's why Facebook, Apple, Google are sitting at the table. That's why I think, look at SSU just bought Basin Street's building, because they can't hire people to come move here. I thought about that with the city manager position that's out there. Hopefully there's a house out there that the city manager could afford to buy going forward. We have the same thing at the county. SMART has the same thing with engineers for the train. You have to have 3 years of heavy locomotive experience. Those people don't live here. They live in Roseville or someplace in Manteca, someplace by train tracks that are much cheaper to live. And even though we increase their salaries by $10,000 a year, it's still not enough to have them move here. So they take a job, they realize after 3 or 4 months, it's not working out, we're bailing, we don't have engineers to, that's a problem throughout, I think, all business sectors here. Doctors, I mean, look at Fountain Grove with the amount of, they can move anywhere they want. So we need to be careful as a community to make sure that we're providing workforce housing, housing for all the, I think all the different levels within society as well.
Well, it's that time. Thank you for the show, and we have something else special for you before we go. Joanne first, would you come up?
All right. The Rotary Club Board of Directors presents you, David Rabbitt, with an honorary membership. For our members, this award recognizes the work of Supervisor David Rabbitt, who has distinguished himself by meritorious service in the furtherance of Rotary ideals and is considered a friend of Rotary for his permanent support of Rotary's cause. And as our honorary member, you no longer have to wait for the generosity of Kip Herzog to invite you to a meeting. You are entitled to attend any meeting and event of the Rotary Club of Petaluma.
Congratulations for your service. It's honorary members or someone who's been doing exemplary work in the community. And you certainly follow that. And as a guest speaker, we have our chicken badge, and in here you'll find a couple things. There's a pin in there for you, as well as a little jewelry box which has lasered the Petaluma chicken. So I hope you'll appreciate that and think of us when you're up there in the Santa Rosa area. Thank you.
Okay, well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. David, thank you very much for that. It was very informative. And remember, this Saturday, 6 p.m., number 9 Scenic Way, I think it is, for our fun friendship feast. And so be sure to be there. Next week, we are dark. The week after that, don't be here. Be down at Heritage Salvage. And on the 26th, we have the gift Giddy. We're down at the Kmart, and we have a lot of things coming. I'll send you an email because there's a lot of things, so I will see you this Saturday and in 2 weeks over there. So with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.